Well, I am very, very excited about our fall series that begins today. I'm very excited that you're here to be a part of it. I had an experience several months ago where I was reading in the book of Isaiah. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about this story, just a little backstory on what we're doing today. I was sitting there looking and reading through the book of Isaiah when suddenly it was like several of the pages just connected with me. Have you ever had that experience? And I felt as though God were present in a way that was not the ordinary. And so those chapters were Isaiah 40 through 46, and the thought came to me at that time, perhaps God could meet us here in this context as we look at these particular chapters together. In chapters 40 through 46, the prophet Isaiah makes an absolutely absurd comparison. I mean, there is no comparison, and yet he makes that comparison over and over again in most of those chapters. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, there's something that I really want you to remember, something I want you to take away with you today as we think about this series and what we're doing here today. A statement that I want you to take with you, and here it is on the screen. You always choose what looks best to you. You always choose what looks best to you. For example, what would you choose today? Just the way your outlook today, what would you choose? The fast food of McDonald's or maybe the upper end menu of Outback Steakhouse? All right? I'm going to give you a chance to answer that question out loud on the count of 3. I want you to shout it at me, all right? McDonald's, Outback. Ready? 1, 2, 3. That's exactly what I was hoping would happen. Did anyone give the wrong answer? No. No one gave the wrong answer. You declared what sounded best to you, even if that was fast food today. I don't understand you, but that was perfectly okay to say. That's what looked best to you. We always choose what looks best to us. Now, there's another statement that I'd like you to remember as well today. We'll put that up on the screen too. You always choose what looks best to you, but what looks best to you is always up for grabs. What looks best to you is always up for grabs. Today it might have been Outback Steakhouse. Tomorrow it might be Taco del Sol or something like that. We're very fickle people. What looks best to us can change from 1 hour to the next. I think one of the fascinating stories on coming out of Wall Street is the Krispy Kreme story. You remember Krispy Kreme was here in Missoula a few years back, and I used to love going in there, a big pane glass window, and you could look and you could see hundreds of donuts coming down that conveyor belt. Remember that? And then they'd fall into that deep vat of grease, and they would be deep fried for the perfect amount of time, and then they'd kick back onto the conveyor belt, and they'd be carried through a waterfall of frosting. I just wanted to lay on that conveyor belt. It's probably more of an image than you needed, but I thought to myself, wow, wonder what shares for this company cost. I should be investing in this. And I think they actually got to about $40 a share. And then one day, a report came out declaring that Krispy Kreme donuts had a high content of fat. No. Tell me it isn't so. And overnight, the bottom fell out of Krispy Kreme, the Krispy Kreme concept. Shares dropped to a single digits. healthy became the new best. You always choose what looks best to you, and what looks best to you is always up for grabs, depending on what you're looking at. Now, I invite you to open your Bible, if you would, to Isaiah chapter 40, is where we're going to be today. Isaiah chapter 40, where the prophet is going to make an absurd comparison. And as we move through this chapter, you are going to be deciding what looks best to you. We're going to pick up in verse 12 of chapter 40. Follow along as I read from the New International Version, where Isaiah writes, "Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand? Or with the breadth of his hand marked off the heavens? Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on the scales and the hills in a balance? Who has understood the mind of the Lord, or instructed him as his counselor? Whom did the Lord consult to enlighten him, and who taught him the right way? Who was it that taught him knowledge or showed him the path of understanding? Surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are regarded as dust on the scales. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust. Lebanon is not sufficient for altar fires. It's not large enough, essentially, is what the prophet is saying. Nor its animals enough for burnt offerings. Before him, all the nations are as nothing. They are regarded by him as worthless and less than nothing. To whom then will you compare God? What image will you compare him to?" Stop there. Here are all these words and images that give God dimension, that give God size, where we're presented with the sheer magnitude of God, were he able to be measured. Measures the waters in his hand, holds the dust of the earth in his hand, weighs the mountains on his own scale, sufficient in and of himself to create and sustain. Isaiah, just runs out of words and simply asks, to whom then will you compare God? What image will you compare him to? And the answer is there is no image to compare him to, but people always choose what looks best to them. And some people choose an idol. Verse 19. As for an idol, a craftsman casts it, and a goldsmith overlays it with gold and fashions silver chains for it. A man too poor to present that kind of an idol, such an offering, selects wood that will not rot. He looks for a skilled craftsman to set up an idol that will not topple. Think about that. God, who is just out there, compared to an idol that you have to prop up so it won't fall over. It's absurd. Jeremiah 10:11 or 10:5 says, like a scarecrow in a melon patch, their idols cannot speak. They must be carried because they cannot walk. They're these inanimate objects that look best to people. But Isaiah is not willing to let it go at that. He continues to make this absolutely absurd comparison for people who need to see who God is, as he continues to hold up God before them. Look at verse 21 of chapter 40. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? And then I love these verbs that are coming. He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of this world to nothing. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground than he blows on them and they wither, and a whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff. To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal? Says the Holy One. Stop there. There is no comparison. Here's this God who's just in motion. He's moving and he's leading. He's creating and he's sustaining and he's raising up and he's tearing down according to his will. And the thing is, this is our God. Think with me. I mean, is that crazy or what? Why would anyone ever choose a lifeless piece of wood as an idol? When they could choose the God of the universe who offers relationship and engagement, the God who is just like way out there, but the God at the same time who is right here. Look at verse 11 of chapter 40. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. Again, he's a moving God, moving toward you, moving as a shepherd to provide for you, moving to restore you, moving to heal you. There is no comparison. And so here's my question. What is it that brings us to choose one thing over another? I mean, what makes us think that something is best? Well, ultimately, the answer is desire. Desire. What looks best is always up for grabs. Today, what looks best is what I can see. And therefore, it's what I desire. Forget that it may be ridiculously less than something else. I desire it because of the possibility of it satisfying me. I want that. That will satisfy me. But it doesn't. I get what I want. I nail it in place so it stays where I want. I stand back and I look at it. And what is best is up for grabs again. I'm off to something else. Meanwhile, 2 Corinthians 4:4 is in play. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Jesus is the image and the person who satisfies. Whether an unbeliever or a believer, the enemy of your soul does not want you to see Jesus as the image of God. The enemy of your soul knows something that we're learning today, and that's this: what looks best to you is always up for grabs. What looked best to you years ago in Awana may no longer look best by comparison to what you're currently looking at and pursuing. What looked best to you in June and Summer Adventure Week may not look best now given to what you're currently seeing and pursuing. What looked best in that Bible study, what looked best back in the day of 40 days of purpose, or back in any direction, it may not be what it was then because something else has taken its place and looks best to you. And the great risk is that in the midst of our desires, we would not look in the direction that Isaiah is pointing. The great risk is that we would be satisfied with idols of our hearts. Things I've told myself will make me satisfied. Things that I really want. Money, possessions, ease, recognition, titles, control, a love relationship, comfort, health, financial independence, my accomplishments, my honor, my way, my rights. All of these things wither and fade. All of these things are scarecrows in a melon patch. Can become idols compared to the pursuit of God. And the thing is, in a church service like this today, we all know that that's the right answer. We all know that there's no comparison between God and idols of the heart. There's no comparison. It's just that we may have pursued those things for so long. They may have consumed so much energy, being right with us wherever we are, that it's tough to admit that one of them has become an idol. It's tough to admit it. When we got back from China in early June, I just could not bring myself to go back to the gym the next day to work out. We were exhausted from that flight. That one flight is like 14 hours long from China just to get to San Francisco, and I was just exhausted. I couldn't bring myself the next day to go and work out. Olivia and I, my youngest daughter, usually work out 3 days a week, and she was wondering when we're going to go back. And so she said, "Hey, Dad, when are we going to go back to the gym?" And I said, I know. I'm just tired from China. And she said, "Dad, that was 3 months ago." I know, I'm really still tired. So a couple of weeks ago, we got back to the gym, and we're doing it now. We're 3 days a week, big deal, for 2 weeks. But, it's just so hard to get back at it. And that first step is the hardest. When it comes to idols of the heart, the first step is the hardest. And the first step is identification. What is the idol in my life, in my heart, if there were one? And I want to help you identify any idol in your heart in this series, if there is one. And it's because that first step is just the most difficult step to take, and it's the step of identification, the step of saying, that's it, right there, and then you name it. And so in the time that remains this morning, I want to just give you a little bit of a diagnostic tool, if we could. I want to give you 3 words, 3 signals, really, that may indicate that there's an idol in your heart. 3 words. The first word is dissatisfaction. That sense of dissatisfaction in your life can indicate that you're looking for satisfaction and you just haven't found it yet. You're trying things, you're pursuing dreams, but none seem to satisfy. John Mayer, in his song, "Something's Missing," popular in the charts right now, here's some of the words. "I'm dizzy from the shopping malls. I searched for joy, but I bought it all. Something's missing. And I don't know how to fix it. Something's missing, and I don't know what it is at all. I can't be sure that this state of mind is not of my own design. I wish there was an over-the-counter test for loneliness like this. Something's missing. I don't know how to fix it. Something's missing, and I don't know what it is. Friends? Check. Money? Check. A well-slept? Check. Opposite sex? Check. Guitar? Check. Microphone? Check. Messages waiting for me when I come home? Check. Something's missing. And many of us hear those words, and we know that there's nothing like the satisfaction that comes from knowing God. I mean, once you come to know God and experience Him and love Him, all search for satisfaction goes away. And so, the pursuit of God ends the search for satisfaction. So if there's any level of dissatisfaction in your life, where is it at? Have you been putting your hope in something other than God? Maybe it's a signal of an idol in your heart, and only the Spirit of God can show it to you. Dissatisfaction. Second word, conflict. Conflict. Conflict is as normal as getting out of bed in the morning. Conflict does not indicate that you have an idol in your heart. Prolonged conflict is another story. In marriage, in your work, in your family, in your church, prolonged conflict in your life may indicate an idol in your heart. And that idol needs to be identified. And there's a way to identify an idol in your heart, because an idol always follows a particular progression. Here's the way it goes. First, it's I desire. Obviously, some desires are not good, but there's plenty of desires that are all right. I was looking in the trailer, in the video before the message, and one of the desires is I like to go to the lake for a day, for rest. Nothing wrong with that desire. Everything begins with a desire. But take the desire for peace and quiet, for example. That's perfectly reasonable. But what if I don't get peace and quiet like I'd like? I desire oftentimes goes to I demand. I work hard all week long. I deserve some peace and quiet around here. Maybe the kids are roughhousing or whatever, and you want peace and quiet. I desire goes to I demand, goes to I judge. I don't get what I demand, and I start judging. What is it with you people? Can you not give me some peace and quiet? And there's a bite in my words. There's some edge of attitude that comes across. I desire, I demand, I judge. The progression continues. I punish. Idols demand sacrifices. When someone fails to satisfy my demands and and they're not sharp enough to pick up the edge in my voice that is subliminally being disrespectful, well, then I punish them. I make them pay. That's the progression of an idol. And isn't that the progression of conflict? I desire, I demand, I judge, and end of the day, I punish. And the worldly way is just to go away. I just can't, I just got to get away from this. This person is impossible. But the way of the Lord, while not at all intuitive, is to move toward conflict. And you will never do that unless you see Jesus for who he is. And it is the way of the Lord. I've been thinking about this. Part of my calling as your pastor is to lead and preach and pray in such a way that when the day of conflict comes for you, you have the tools in your box to move into it. And believe me, you want to make sure you got the right tools in your box, because when you move into conflict without the right tools, without skills, it's going to be like a hand grenade in your hand without a pin. You're going to blow yourself up. And the right tools are available. Biblical tools. I have with me today a copy of The Peacemaker by Ken Sande. It's subtitled A Biblical Guide to Resolving Personal Conflict. What I shared about the progression of an idol just a moment ago is in this book. And it's extremely helpful to have it. I want to say to you that I'm very excited about this fall here at MAC. We have some excellent leaders who are going to be helping us in this area starting next week. Jamie Branson, Doug Odegaard have continued to get extensive training in personal peacemaking. Next Sunday morning at 9:43, we're going to have Gary Friesen here, who is with the organization Peacemakers, and now is with the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and has graciously agreed to come to Missoula next Sunday morning. I hope you'll be here in the auditorium at 9:43 next Sunday morning for that experience, as Gary gives us more of this very stuff. But we've been working on this for a while now, and the elders are involved, and we have set a goal that everyone at MAC, get this, 100% of the people who identify with MAC, we've set a goal that everyone would get the Peacemaker training. And that's available for all age levels. There's appropriate materials for kids, appropriate materials for students, and there are these materials for adults as well. And we have set a goal that everybody at MAC would get that training in the next 2 years. There will be multiple venues. There will be multiple times and time slots in the next couple of years when you could get that training for X number of weeks, so that you've got the tools that you need to move into conflict. All right, one more word possibly signals an idol, and it's the word disconnection. Now, I included this word because many in God's church across the country attend churches but are disconnected. And it's a sad reality, because we're made for relationship, and the church is designed to be a celebration of community. You have in Scripture all the one another's. Love one another, forgive one another, encourage one another, pray for one another, all kinds of one another's. Here at MAC, our whole ministry is geared for you to be in relationship with others. This morning at 9:43 today, there was all the options to be a part of various Bible studies during the course of the week. But here's something I want to have you think about. Maybe you've fashioned for yourself a life where you're not in community, where you don't have to answer to anyone, where you don't have to sacrifice for anyone. You've fashioned a life for yourself that you've considered to be what you want. Or you just simply have a sense of disconnection. Think with me. Could that signal something in your heart that over time has become very important to you, and it keeps you from being in community? 3 words, 3 signals that may indicate an idol of your heart: dissatisfaction, conflict, disconnection. Would you bow your head with me for just a moment? If you would bow your head, I just want to speak to you specifically, not generally. You know, part of this series is designed to help you uncover any idols that may be in your heart. And I'm wondering this morning if you might be willing to take the step of asking God by His Spirit to identify for you an idol in your heart, if there's one there. Last evening I was preparing my heart for this morning, and I came to John chapter 15, where Jesus said, "Ask anything in my name, and I'll give it to you, and I will bring glory to my Father in that way." If you will ask God, if you'll have the courage going into this series to ask God, show me any idol that has become an idol in my heart, God will answer that prayer. And you will be free then to pursue all that He is and all that He has for you. Will you make that matter of prayer this morning? Even in these next moments, ask God to show you your own heart.